All right, let's begin with the top level. At this point, the top level peace talks between US and Iran in Islamabad failed, with US Vice President announcing that they are heading back to the US without any agreement. That happened earlier this morning. Now, the talks were scheduled, in fact, to continue into Sunday, but then there was a change. The talks extended well beyond original schedule and then went on for 21 hours, as JD Vance had mentioned, before turning inconclusive.
We have been at it now for 21 hours. And we've had a number of substantive discussions with the Iranians. That's the good news. The bad news is that we have not reached an agreement. And I think that's bad news for Iran much more than it's bad news for the United States of America. So we go back to the United States having not come to an agreement. We've made very clear what our red lines are, what things we're willing to accommodate them on, and what things we're not willing to accommodate them on. And we've made that as clear as we possibly could. And they have chosen not to accept our terms.
Over the past 24 hours, discussions were held on topics including the Strait of Hormuz, the nuclear issue, that's nuclear enrichment for Iran, war reparations, as they've mentioned many times before, lifting of sanctions, which have been in place ever since JCPOA was abandoned, and complete end of war against Iran. Now, the Iranian state media said that Iran-US negotiations ended without an agreement. It further suggested that America's excessive demands prevented a common framework and agreement. Well, the Iranian state media said that Iran repeatedly presented new initiatives and tried to invite the American side. However, US stayed unrealistic, preventing the achievement of any common framework to be achieved. It further added that despite Pakistan's intervention early in the morning, suggesting another round of talks and exchange of texts, which would continue into Sunday, as I'd mentioned earlier in the report, it ended without a result due to the same American spirit. Spokesperson for the Iranian Foreign Ministry, Ismail Baghel, said that the talks were conducted in an atmosphere of mistrust after 40 days of war that was imposed by US. He added Iranian delegation was pursuing the rights and interests of the Iranian people, and it was natural not to reach an agreement in just one session. Baghel said that some of the issues, such as the issue of the Strait of Hormuz, they are more complicated than others. He concluded that Iran will continue its discussions and consultations with various regional allies. Just minutes after his press conference, the US Vice President left Islamabad for Washington. Vance boarded Air Force 2 at little after 7 a.m. and waved to Pakistani officials from the top of the stairs, while Iranian delegation led by Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi left Islamabad an hour after that. And as we've been discussing the developing progress of these talks, or rather I would say the devolving level of these talks in Pakistan, we've been concerning ourselves and also discussing this with voices across the world. We were earlier joined by Stephen Golub from Benicia, California. He's a political analyst and lawyer. Here's how he assesses this.
Oh, man. Wow, when I hear Donald Trump, kind of rubbing my head, when I hear Donald Trump likening the Iran situation to what he did in Venezuela, not only do I want to rub my head, I want to bang my head against the wall, because they're so fundamentally different in terms of Iran having many more resources and tools at its disposal, be they military or other strategic resources, including its control over the strait or ability to blockade the strait. So different in terms of what Trump is in effect threatening against India and China. I'm tempted to say with friends like Trump, who needs enemies, but in any event, what he's doing to these other two major powers, or threatening to do by such a blockade, and explicitly threatening to do, if I understood that excellent report correctly, which covered a lot of ground very well. So is there going to be an escalation? Well, as your correspondent put it very well, we've heard this before about Trump is going to step up. We'll never see destruction like this again. We've never seen destruction like what he's going to rain down on Iran. He said it again and then again and again. May he yet escalate far beyond the massive destruction that he already undertook against Iran. I guess it's conceivable, but he's not completely credible when it comes to that. And in terms of this blockade, it could have so many ramifications in terms of including counter steps against the US. I can't speak for what India might do, but China has tools at its disposal, not necessarily militarily by any means, although I understand it does have a few warships in the general region. But in terms of economic steps it could take, in terms of denying, key minerals to U.S. that China substantially controls, all sorts of other things it could do on a strategic or economical level that broadens this conflict in some dangerous and unpredictable ways. So I get back to likening this to what Trump did against Venezuela is just a mistake, but it doesn't surprise me that he's thinking along these lines because he has tended to think that everything can be solved very simplistically. And as the Iran war has demonstrated, that's not the case. Reality is much more complicated than the way he sometimes views the world.